Wolfman is in theaters now, and it is really good. Now, I am the biggest fan in the world of Invisible Man 2020. I think Leigh Whannell did an exceptional job with that Universal Monster property, and here we are at the next one. I will disclose up front, this is not as good as Invisible Man, but I have that movie on a pedestal, so I didn't go in with those kind of expectations. This is still a great movie. It is solid. It is really good, really fun if you're into that kind of body horror. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. I like that, I think, a little bit better than The Thing, and I love The Thing, but that's the one that I gravitate to, is like, that's the body horror that like blows me away. And this is very much The Fly by way of a Universal Monster. You know, in every werewolf movie or TV show or scene in animation, whatever it is, you always see a scene where they transform, usually for the first time. And it's a scene that shows a little bit of the body horror of like bones snapping, breaking, and rehealing and forming in new ways. Even in my book, when I wrote about werewolves, I had scenes like that, multiple, that disclosed basically this is what was happening. It's always the same kind of thing. And it's something that is associated with the idea of a werewolf, in my opinion. And kind of every single werewolf story has a scene like that. But no werewolf story that I know of has just been that scene for the entire story. So the first act of the movie kind of ends and they're stuck in the trees and the werewolf interacts. You see this in the trailers. This is not a spoiler. This is all in the trailers. But the werewolf scratches him and he gets infected. And the rest of the movie, all the way through to the final scene, is just the transformation. That's such an interesting angle to take. Like, I have not seen that done before. That is really interesting. Maybe it has been done. There's been a lot of werewolf adaptations, but for my money, that's really interesting to see that taken in that direction. The effects, practical and CGI, I thought they blended them really well. I never could tell when they were different from each other. It just felt like, yep, these are werewolves. And on topic of that, people are going to say, oh, it doesn't look like a werewolf. I even said that on my show.
If this is what the werewolf design will look like in the film, this might go down in Universal's 100-year-long history as the worst werewolf design we've seen on screen. It looks like a 70-year-old crack addict with pure white hair, no fur at all, and what appears to be a massive receding hairline, the least intimidating possible hairline.
If you watch this movie, it is very much in tradition of a werewolf. It's got all of the same attributes. It's got all of the same abilities. It's got all the same weaknesses. Not silver, obviously, but it's just interpreted in this version as a degenerative disease that, very similar to rabies, just wears an animal down, or wears a person down into an animal that's wearing down. Big question here, how does it rank in terms of the Universal monsters? If we're talking about just the Larry Talbot Wolfman movies, I would say this is better than 2010's Wolfman, just as a movie. But I like the werewolf scenes in 2010's better than the ones in this, because the werewolf scenes in this are mostly tragic about the man degrading into a beast, whereas 2010's Wolfman kind of knew when to have fun with it, you know? And it was like that asylum scene where everyone thinks he's crazy and he breaks out and kills everyone. There's no scene like that in this. That's a genuinely fun concept. But again, I haven't seen an entire story just dedicated to the transformation, which is a really interesting angle, but it has its drawbacks. So, like I said, this is better than 2010's Wolfman remake. Do I like it better than 1941's Wolfman? Now, there's a real question, because I was never the biggest fan. I love the classic Universal monsters. I love Dracula. I love Frankenstein. I love Wolfman. That first Wolfman movie was never super special to me. I think I gave it like a 6 when I watched it, but I still have a lot of problems with that movie. Like, why does he watch from the Hubble telescope like this woman from across the thing, and walks over and she just immediately starts like liking him, even though he's super creepy and kind of, you know, sad and a little overweight. Like it didn't jive with me, that whole romance, and that's so much of that movie. So I'm just talking about that in contrast with this. This family, this relationship dynamic is so well told. So I think just from the get-go, the characters are like way more just investable here and way more interesting to follow here than they were in 1941's Wolfman. So yeah, I think I would put this above that one. Again, that's by a hair. I think they're two good movies. I prefer this. Like, if you're asking me today which would I rather rewatch, I'm rewatching 2025's Wolfman sooner than 1941's Wolfman. That's just me. How does it rank amongst the Universal Monster remakes? Well, there's a real question. I mean, I still love Invisible Man at the top. Van Helsing also at the top. This would go in, I would call it an 8 out of 10, personally. This would go in the next tier down. So it's not amazing, but it's really fun, really enjoyable. I would put this alongside movies like Last Voyage of the Demeter or Renfield in terms of enjoyment. Like, yes, I would very much, if it's on, I'm down to watch it. It's a fun time. But I do have some problems with it here and there. And I actually haven't talked about my problems with this movie. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but because the movie artistically chooses to focus on the transformation for the entire duration of the movie, you do lose out on types of scenes that are typically in werewolf movies, like a full end stage transformation entity werewolfing out and just prowling, hunting, being hunted. You know, maybe there's a little bit of a fight in there. There is one fight scene in this movie between a werewolf and him when he's half trans. He's not fully werewolfed yet, but he's still very beast-like. That fight was fun, but I felt very similarly to 2010's Wolfman, where that fight lasted like 20 seconds. And it's like, that's way more interesting than the movie dedicates the time for it to be interesting for. And again, it's more artistically done here. I loved, again, I want to talk about artistically done. I loved when they went to his perspective. You see a taste of this in the trailers, where it shifts to him and all the words are jumbled. Yeah, that effect never gets old, because every scene they use it in a new way. Like, there's one scene, I'm not going to spoil it, but her and her daughter are basically in the barn and all the lights are off. And you don't know where the werewolf is. And the camera swivels around to his point of view. He's literally right in front of them. Oh my God, he's just watching them, and he's watching them look into like different parts of the barn, not knowing where he is, but he's like 2 feet away. And then it swivels back to them and it's all dark. And it's like, whoa, there's really creative uses of that effect here. But yes, of course, the negative I would give is that there aren't scenes, because they're choosing to focus on the transformation, there aren't scenes that are typically in other werewolf movies that kind of should be there, like enjoyable, full force, bestial, powerful things, like running through nature, destroying everything. And I get why, it's portrayed as more of a disease, similar to like rabies or something along those lines. Or if you want to get into fiction, like zombies or something like that. It's more of that than it is an actual primal, beast. But it is, it's still got a little bit of that flavor in there. So the people that are looking for like a real, like awesome force, an entity to be reckoned with, they're not really going to find that here. Obviously, a Wolfman is like scary in this movie. If you see one of those decrepit dudes with claws and teeth crawling after you, you're obviously scared. You're running the other direction, but like it's not, say, as imposing as even 2010's Wolfman. I thought was faster, stronger, could do more, killed way more people. So like I said, overall 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it's great. You don't even have to be a big fan of the Universal monsters to watch this. You can just watch it straight as a simple little horror movie. It gets the job done. It really surprises. It's really well told, like I've been saying. The directing, of course, is just on point. I think Leigh Whannell is really crafting a strong style here. There are just some excellent scenes that depict like how he's interpreting the world around him. And anytime that the camera like went to those moments or the scenes were conveying that message, I was just so interested in it. And then it goes back to her and her daughter watching him just be like this mumbling, decrepit, transforming individual. And because of those scenes, that he's genuinely there, like begging for their help, but he's unable to speak. Like, how tragic is that? You still see parts of him, like the part of the Blake that is introduced in the first act and that we're very clear and established with what he wants, what his goals are. That character is still there the whole time. It's just less and less and less and less and less as the movie goes on and on and on and on, until the end of the movie when he is full beast mode. There is, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a speck of him left, and you see that manifest at the very end. And I'm just like, wow. There's like 1% of his brain that's left in there. He's just begging to be noticed. And I won't tell you what happens, but, oh man, it's good. It's a satisfying ending. I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it was great. Again, back to negatives. I would like to have known more about what happened with his dad. It's referenced. We never really see it. We just have it implied, and I really could have used a nice conclusion to that story. Like, was his dad the werewolf that got him? Like the werewolf that bit. I'm not going to get into it, but the werewolf that attacked them had pure white hair. That was the only werewolf like that, and it's established that his dad in the story was like in his 70s or 80s when he died, because 30 years ago he was like 40 or 50. There's a good argument to be made that the werewolf that started the plot of this movie is his father. They never address that and never get into that. I think that's the implication. I think that's pretty clear. I thought the acting all around was really strong, just like Invisible Man. I mean, Leigh Whannell is the kind of director that I've gathered so far that knows how to get really strong performances out of his characters and really well establish his characters. In Invisible Man, I still remember Aldous Hodge's character. I still remember Storm Reed and what they were doing, and what they had their own little storylines throughout the movie, and those did manifest, and they had little arcs, and like a lesser horror movie would just have them there just so they could die. And I really appreciate how even in a movie like this with a limited cast and limited set of characters, each of them has a purpose, each of them has an arc, each of them has something to do. There's never anybody that feels like cannon fodder. Even a character in the first act leading into the second that I think his name's David. David still feels like, oh, he's going to be a little cannon foddery character. Yes and no. That's all I'll say about that. I really appreciate how this movie implemented its characters, and that's something that Leigh Whannell does so well. Again, not perfect, got my problems, and it is what it is, but it just comes down to taste, what you're into, what you're looking for in a monster movie, and I was just looking for a good movie. I got it. I got a really good movie, so I'm really happy with it. Yeah, strong start to the year. Sad it's the only Universal monster movie this year. I could have used another, but looking forward to Mummy.